I'm Patrick Watson, I'm an astrologer, and this is the first episode of my new interview podcast series, Big Fat Astro Chat. I'm joined here today with up-and-coming astrologer Jo Gleason. Jo, you're my first ever guest on Big Fat Astro Blog. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It is my pleasure, Patrick.
Thanks. Awesome. So just so everyone knows a little bit about Jo, she's an astrologer based out of Oklahoma. She's a social media maven for the Association for Young Astrologers, and she's been making quite a splash in the astrology community lately. She recently launched a new YouTube channel called Cups and Crowns with fellow astrologer Ryan Butler. And she also recently launched her own website, which you should definitely follow at www.amyjogleason.com. And that's J-O and Gleason, G-L-E-A-S-O-N. So www.amyjogleason.com. There should be a graphic on the bottom there. And that's where she'll be posting more of her great articles. And you can check out her services and consultations. But for now, that's my little introduction for you, Jo. So tell us, so how did you get into astrology?
Well, my getting into astrology story is pretty familiar, honestly. I was super into horoscopes. They always seemed super accurate for me, but, that was even from the time when I was like probably 11, 12. I had one of those little like Barnes and Noble books that you take to sleepovers where they had like personality quizzes and like sun sign descriptions. And I was always like, oh my gosh, this is so mystical and like so accurate. And but I am from Oklahoma, like you mentioned. I grew up in a very conservative Christian family, and I was always a straight and narrow kid. Like, I'm not a rule breaker. That's eased up as I've gotten older, but it wasn't until I was 19 or 20 that I even did the Googling that I was afraid to do in my teen years on astrology. Like, I was that kid that was like, God can literally see me Googling these like occult things. Yeah. Wow. So, but yeah, when I got into metaphysics, it was actually palmistry first, and I was really into it. And I read this book by Cairo, and I believe he's the same guy that proposed that sign cusps, which aren't a thing in the first place, should be like 7 degrees on each side. Completely ridiculous. Anyway, I noticed there were astrological correspondences with palmistry, and that started me back into being like, oh yeah, astrology. Like, what's that all about? And it was kind of just a rabbit hole from there. So
that's really interesting that you came from a family and just generally from a region which one would presume would be more hostile to astrology. What I always thought was funny, and maybe you can tell me if this is true or not, is I tend to find that with a lot of conservative Christian people that they're not against astrology because they don't believe in it, but because they think it's evil. It's not that they don't believe their disbelief in it is different from like skeptics who oppose it on scientific grounds, and opposition to it is based more on morality. So it's not that they don't think astrology works. They think it works, but they also think it's the devil. Would you say that's correct?
Yeah, literally. I would say that's correct. I mean, I'm kind of living proof of that. I was like, as long as I treat it as entertainment, I'm still a good person. It wasn't like I was so intellectually skeptical that I was like, oh, this is bullshit. Like, this can't work. But it was totally a morality thing.
Interesting. So like, does your family know about like this pursuit of astrology of yours? Is that too personal a question?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it is a personal question.
No, not at all.
Oh, okay.
No, I think there's a little bit of lag. No, that's not too personal. And yes, they do know that I'm an astrologer. Yeah, my parents have loosened up a lot over the years.
Oh, okay.
I'm the youngest of 3. By the time I was getting into astrology, they were like, you know what? At least she's not doing whatever list of other things that could like put her life in danger or something. So
better than drugs. Astrology better than
literally though.
Yeah. I suppose that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, for real.
That's fascinating. So are they interested in like their signs or their charts or anything, like, or do they just kind of go like, You can do that stuff, but don't talk to it. Kind of like how, they know that like their kids masturbate and look at porn, but like they don't want to, like it's too intimate for them to like really ask about. Is it like that, or is astrology like masturbation? Is what I'm asking.
Fun. Okay, I have to digress for a second.
Okay, all right.
So Ryan Butler.
All right, yeah, Ryan. Here we go.
So Ryan has this term for people on the internet, particularly on Reddit, who just post things for discussion, but it's really just to talk about their own charts, and he calls it astrobation. And I just think that's brilliant.
That is brilliant.
I know. Leave it to Ryan, right? But no, they're not too hands off about it. They don't ask me about their charts. My brother and sister are way more open to asking me about that kind of stuff. My parents, not so much, but my dad in particular is like, he's seen that I've pursued this with a lot of critical thinking and with a lot of like intellectual integrity, and it's taken him from being, stalwartly against it to being like intrigued and and we've had a lot of really great discussions on it. We actually just swapped books on the Star of Bethlehem. I have the Michael Molnar book, and we were like trading notes, and he would like send me pictures and like
that's
and he's being super inquisitive about it because of the stuff he's learned about astrology, and I'm just like, oh, Dad, I'm so proud of you.
Well,
so yeah, they're not open, but they're definitely not like upset about it and hands off about it. They just kind of don't really get it.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Although it's funny because I think in many ways it's the grand irony of sort of hardline conservative Christian opposition to astrology is that to me, it doesn't seem that there would be necessarily any kind of theological conflict between Christianity and believing in astrology. I mean, I think in some ways that's a good way to approach that issue with people who are hostile to astrology on religious grounds, because I think that astrology is trans-religious. It doesn't, I mean, you could be I know Muslim astrologers, I know Christian astrologers. Absolutely. Like it doesn't, it's not it's not bound to a particular religious belief unless your religious belief is that astrology is evil. But I also find that referencing the sort of astrological allusions to the Bible tend to be, if not persuasive, then at least, gives someone a bit more to think about, especially if they take the Bible very seriously. So that's fascinating.
Right, it's thought-provoking.
Now, what about Oklahoma just in general, like the region you come from? Because that's your family, but what about kind of the broader community? Is there an astrological scene in Oklahoma?
You're looking at it, pretty much.
You're representing. Yeah. Okay. All right. Good.
Well, I mean, there's a local meetup group, but it's kind of like this small group that meets at Panera, and it's $10 admission, and they look at charts together, their own charts together, and there's a lady leading it, and usually they might read a blog post from Kelly Rosano or something like that. I went once and it wasn't really my bag, and it's a pretty small group, so that's kind of it. So like there's not a lot. I'm being a little sarcastic when I say that like I am the community. Right. I don't mean that in an arrogant way. There's just it's very sparse. Very sparse.
Astrology and carbs at Panera. That's yeah. I mean, it's funny though because I find, and I'm sure, I mean, you obviously get this, that astrology is so online now. I mean, you literally can live anywhere and be part of the astrological community. So, I mean, it's always, it really is like a global village. Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. And we've never been in this position before as astrologers. So this is totally new.
Yeah, it's crazy when you think about it.
That is crazy. So I also wanted to ask you about your new YouTube channel. You have a new YouTube channel, which is really, I feel like we're in the middle of like a kind of YouTube astrology, like high point or renaissance or something. It seems like there's a lot of activity now happening on YouTube. So I'm really, really glad that you and Ryan Butler are getting in on the game. So could you tell me a little bit about, how'd you get the idea to start this channel and what it's about and where you got the name from and all that good stuff.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so we've actually had this idea for so long, like you don't even understand. So like shortly after I met Ryan, we met online, of course, and we started talking, and I was actually his client for a medical horary, which was incredible. He helped cure a mysterious illness of mine, and it was great. And then we just kept in touch. Yeah, that's like the whole other like story. But
Ryan Butler, MD.
And yeah, pretty much of the yeah, pretty much. So yeah, very, very high praises for Ryan. But yeah, so I had always kind of wanted to start a YouTube channel because I love to help people and help educate people and fill knowledge gaps, especially when it's something that I'm passionate about and other people are really like passionate about, like astrology.
Mm-hmm.
And I was basically just too chicken to do it for a really long time. But one day Ryan and I were just talking. We were talking about Reddit, honestly. We were like, oh my gosh, all these people, posting all these things, I want to help them. I wish there was a good YouTube channel for just basics. And Ryan was like, we should make one and do this, and this. And I was like, oh my gosh, is he reading my mind? Like, this is exactly what I've wanted to do with YouTube. I had wanted to do that for about a year and just hadn't done it. And he was like, we could call it What the Actual Astrology. And I was like, that's so funny.
You should have called it Astrobation. Astrobation.
Oh. Yeah. Different channel. Maybe that could be like a playlist later.
That's my private channel.
Yeah. That's the DTube channel. Yeah. So anyway, so we had this idea. We planned out so many episodes, and then I started going down once a month for an astrology meetup in Dallas, which is where Ryan is from. And since there's a much bigger, more active community there, and we planned all this out, and we actually only started recording actually about a year later, which was this last fall. And so yeah, it's been a long time prepping and preparing and getting everything in order, getting schedules synced up. But we obviously decided not to call it What the Actual Astrology. We thought that might be a little too feral, a little too mean. So we settled on something much more obscure, which is, the channel name is a story as well.
Cups and Crowns. I figured maybe it had something to do with bra sizes and hat sizes or something. Cups, crowns.
Not quite.
Or maybe tarot.
I mean, I totally see where you would.
I thought maybe it was.
It's very tarot-y sounding.
Okay, because I'm totally.
It's
tarot
actually
ignorant.
Okay.
I'm a tarotable person. I don't really understand tarot.
Oh my god.
But
I too am a terrible person. Yeah. No, it's not a tarot reference. It certainly sounds like one, but we were trying to come up with a name, and we spent like an entire evening just like sitting on his sectional, just like trying to brainstorm. It was like, what can we call this that isn't terrible? Like Astro Facts or like some stupid crap, like I did not want it to be called something dumb like that. Neither did Ryan. We were like, what can we do that's clever? And we bounced around so many ideas, many of them terrible, many of them having to do with cats. For those of you who don't know, Ryan has 8 cats. So it's a big part of our life and friendship. But anyway, I'll just leave it at this to make a very long story short. Mm-hmm. Cups and Crowns is a very obscure allusion to our shared chart placements. We have a couple chart placements that we share, and it's an allusion to that. But you would I would guess that there are only 1 or 2 people who could look at it and know both of our charts and be like, oh. So anyway, it's an allusion to shared chart placements, and it's very obscure. So
I bet I have an idea, so I'll test my theory with you.
So that's the story.
Afterwards.
I'm excited.
That's fascinating, and I really keep it up. Keep up what you're doing with Cups and Crowns, because the videos look so slick. And for anyone watching, anyone listening, especially if you're kind of new to astrology or there's things you don't understand, like I think that will definitely be a channel to keep track of, because it's really clear, and I think it's just what we need. You know, because I feel like there's a lot of advanced high-level material out there, and then there's like my stuff, which I don't even know what you call that. It's sort of like halfway between, is like I'm like the gateway drug to Chris or something. I don't know. But yeah, but
The
I think
gateway drug. No, your content is great though, because it's like you've got the humor thing. Your stuff is really watchable, but like it teaches people things, and that's what YouTube needs. Like I was super excited when you started your channel. I was like, oh my god, there's gonna be like really good astrology on YouTube.
Yeah, it's, you know, well, thank you very much. I wasn't fishing for the compliment. But yeah, I think it's so good what you're doing. So definitely keep it up. Keep on Ryan to keep putting those up, and I'll make sure that.
Spoiler alert: we have like 16 weeks worth of content already recorded.
Wow.
So you know, definitely keep an eye if that's something you're interested in, because there's a lot in the pipeline.
Yeah.
And we're very excited. And so thank you so much, Patrick. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, everyone should subscribe to it. I've already subscribed. I have your channel as a featured channel on my page on YouTube. So make sure that.
Oh, thank you, Patrick.
Oh, no problem. No problem at all. So let's talk about something that I know kind of grinds your gears a little bit. Planetary.
Ooh, okay.
The grid, which show you know, which planets are in aspect and where they are. So my question for you is, why do they suck so much?
Oh, why don't they suck? I mean, there are reasons why they don't suck. They're much easier to read for beginners. Granted, got it. I'm for that. Like, I'm there for that to a degree. I think they suck because they can become kind of a crutch, and they can kind of prevent people from doing the work to learn how to read a circular chart, which is not easy if you're starting out. I had such a hard time with actual circular natal charts when I was starting out, but one of the main things you miss when you convert the circular chart wheel to a table is the astronomical piece of the puzzle. Like, when it's in a table, it's kind of like, you know, that's just one step up from just reading, like, you know, a description for Sun in Libra and like Mercury in Aries and like whatever. It's just one step up from that. It just shows you the placements, and you can kind of go, oh, I think I know what, you know, Sun in Libra means.
Yeah.
But the circular wheel, because when you think about it, okay, what is a natal chart? What is an astrology chart? It's like a blueprint or a map of all the celestial bodies at the exact moment you were born. And you just don't get that same sense when it's in a table. But when it's in the circular format and you kind of understand the basics, you know, what is the rising sun? Why is it called that? What is the descendant or the midheaven? Like, you start to get a sense of like, oh, I have all these planets, you know, that were above the horizon when I was born, or below the horizon.
You can actually see
and
it.
You start thinking more symbolically immediately. Yes, there's something more tangible about it. And you know, you can take that even further and be like, well, can you go out in the, you know, during the night and like look up at the sky and be able to pick out, you know, what's a planet and what's, you know, what's a constellation? Or can you kind of tell by where the moon is, you know, what other planets might be around it, and that kind of thing. And that's even like more that way, but it makes it more real and more tangible in a way.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And I think that's so important, because we're dealing with a symbolic craft.
Right.
100%. So the symbolism of the circular chart, I just think, is of the utmost importance.
Yeah. I mean, so much of astrology is visual. You know, a lot of interpretations of astrology derive from the way it actually looks. So, I mean, even wheel charts in some ways are kind of divorced from like what the sky looks like. So, absolutely. Yeah, so, I mean, that the grids, you know, just take you that much further away from like what's going on. So I thought it was such a cool idea that you had with some other astrologers like Sam Reynolds. I forget who else was in on it. what were some of the hashtags associated with that Twitter teaching everyone how to read circle charts?
Well,
flip the table, go full circle.
Flip the table, yes. Flip the table, go full circle. And actually what happened is Wade Caves brought Astro Roast to Twitter. I believe you might know a little something about that, Patrick. So from there, that's when people started posting tables, and they were like, here's my chart. And Sam was like, no, baby, I'm not reading a chart or a table. He was like, no. You need a circular chart. That's what you need to be able to read. And everyone was like, well, I don't know how. And then he was like, well, let's January 1st, we'll teach you. And Ryan is actually the one who came up with the hashtags. He was kind of on the periphery of this, just kind of being Ryan, throwing in comments here and there. But like, he came up with these like, could not be better hashtags. And that's kind of how that was born. Sam initiated, Ryan made up the hashtags. And,
good to know.
Everyone rushed to the vanguard.
I really wanted to be part of that since I was part of the Astro Roast. And there are people who are still asking me to roast their natal charts, and I haven't been able to get back to them. I was
Really?
Yeah, I was
my gosh.
I was really overwhelmed at that point because there was a bunch of like hospital 6th house Saturn stuff going on, not with me personally, but with my wife. So so I was kind of out of the picture at that time, but I really wanted to get the hashtag circle jerk going, but somehow I don't really think that would capture the right idea. So I thought what I thought, I guess that makes me the circle jerk, right? The jerk about circle. So so I thought it was pretty ballsy of you when you like called out that one site that generates these tables, and then like they were kind of responded to you on Twitter. Like,
wait, did they?
Yeah, I thought they did.
Because I haven't been able to get a hold of Cafe Astrology.
Because I thought
I've literally tried to reach out and be like, why are your chart calculations wrong?
No, I think they respond. I remember.
Well, I'm gonna have to go back.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing like them kind of respond to you, and I was like, oh shoot.
Shots fired.
Hilarious. So
I was actually I was actually I was out of town during this whole thing. Like on Christmas Day is when this kind of got rolling, and then I was like, and Ryan and I were like, okay, so do we launch the channel? Is this the perfect opportunity to just do the first video? And we had always planned for me to just do how to read a chart. We had planned to do this video months ago, but I was just going to do it solo because it was going to be graphics heavy, and we were thinking about doing screen caps, and Ryan was like, how about you just do that one solo, and that'll be easier for you to edit and everything. So so I had just like not very much time to like finish making Christmas presents, wrapping everything, cleaning the house before I went, packing, driving 10 hours to Colorado. And then like New Year's Eve happened, and then New Year's Day happened. And so I probably missed the reply. All of that to say. But
I'll have to
I'm gonna go back.
Yeah, there's so many Astro Roast posts I didn't get back to, and I just, I really want to roast some people. So, all right, let's be honest, Jo. How often do you use electional astrology in your day-to-day life?
How often? Okay, honestly, not that much, because here is the thing about me. I will freak out about having it perfect. And I understand that sometimes you just cannot elect everything, and you cannot elect it perfectly. That said, I did elect my haircut 2 days ago.
Oh, really?
And I actually, I say I elected it. Ryan elected it for me. I was like, hey, Ryan, I want to do this thing where I chop off, all these split ends and see how fast I can get my hair to grow. So I want to elect all my trims for like the year ahead. And I was like, do you have any like old sources that mention this that I might not know about? So he sent me a picture of something, and he was like, oh, you could do January 18th at 1:00. And I was like, oh, perfect. And like, I've elected haircuts before when I used to cut my own hair. So I've elected haircuts like that before, but
Interesting.
There will be many more elections in my future for the hair thing. I'm gonna see how fast it can grow.
Your hair looks lovely.
Yeah.
I've never elected a haircut, and
Thank
it
you.
shows. That's really interesting because yeah, I usually do elect, like anytime like I've sent in job applications, I usually elect the time that I like send it.
Right.
Sometimes important emails, I try to elect those. Sometimes is there anything like really petty that you might use electional astrology for? Oh, just for context, just for anyone who's listening, if you don't know what electional astrology is simply when you elect or choose a moment that is astrologically supportive of whatever endeavor you're trying to accomplish, like a haircut or going for a job, or I don't know, hatching some evil scheme, or starting a diet. That was my most recent election myself. But so all right, so you don't actually use it too much because you're afraid that you'll want to get everything perfect, and by necessity you can't.
Right. It would be analysis paralysis in many situations.
Analysis.
There are times when I'm like, yeah, that not my term. I don't know where I heard that. Probably somewhere, everywhere. Probably everyone used that. Anyways, yeah, it's kind of a great theme for my life. There will be times when I'm like, oh, I need to do a thing, and like the moon is doing nothing but being like besieged by malefics or something, and I'll just be like, I'm just gonna wait till tomorrow when the moon's not like in literally the worst shape possible. But I keep it pretty light other than that. But like I elected, yeah, not a good time to do anything. I elected my buying my website domain. I elected the Cups and Crowns channel. We did elect that for sure. But as far as the most petty thing I might use electional for, it would be really fun, and I probably could not bring myself to do this, but it would be so great to get like a nasty like angular malefics thing to just like totally do a social media takedown of someone. That would be so awesome. So like to get the ruler of the 7th like just in the worst shape possible, and like that would be so gross, and like I literally wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I did that. But like a girl can dream.
Well, I think in some cases, though, I think there are, for example, a good Mars election might be if you were kind of having to call someone out for something in a public way, like if you were releasing an article which was like exposing, a politician or celebrity or something, and you kind of had to have a lot of courage and you wanted to be able to do some damage, then yeah, I guess like a really well placed Mars as the ascendant ruler would make sense. And actually there will be some really good,
cool, yeah.
There will be some really good Mars elections coming up later this summer, because Mars will be stationing direct, that's a really good time for something to elect a Mars electional chart, because then Mars is in its best sign, but it's actually going to be stationing direct on the degree of its exaltation as well, 28 Capricorn. So that's going to be a particularly powerful time for Mars elections.
Oh yeah.
Curious, when you do like your electional charts for your for cutting your hair, do you emphasize like Venus, around the ascendant? Like what's your approach to like a haircut electional chart?
So my priorities right now and kind of forever have just been to get my hair to grow as fast as possible, because I've always kept my hair long. And so what I'm looking for is a waxing moon in a fertile sign, preferably with some light, or at the exact moment of the new moon, like the moon Kazemi moment in a water sign, preferably. So that's the main thing, waxing moon, fertile sign. But for this past, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think Valens mentions the sign of Pisces as being relevant for like hairdressers and hair cutting, presumably because of Venus's exaltation in Pisces. There's something he mentions about Pisces. So you mentioned moon, or moon in a fertile sign. So Pisces kind of came to mind. Yeah. Sorry,
right. Like there's in my mind, I feel like there's no better place to have the moon or like emphasize things than Pisces, because you've got like Jupiter. Jupiter loves to make things healthy and loves to make things grow. And then like it's the exaltation of Venus, which is just like, and make it beautiful and healthy and grow.
Right.
So I usually try to get the moon applying to Jupiter or Venus. Pretty much anything else is like a no-go. Like Mercury wants to destabilize and contest. I don't want my hair to do any of those things. And obviously Saturn and Mars are just like, why would you ever?
You got to cut too short.
Unless you don't want to cut your hair very often and you don't want it to grow. That'd be a great way, like waning moon, applying to Saturn or Mars.
A buzz
if you're going to, yep.
Yeah. Chopping it off. Makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
I've never really thought about my hair all that much. So that's so peculiar. Well, not peculiar, but just interesting to me, just because I've never thought of using electional astrology that way. That's really cool. I learned something new. Okay.
Yeah.
So now we're gonna do some free association. So I'm gonna tell you a phrase or a word or like a term, and I just want you to blurt out kind of your honest reaction. Okay, so it doesn't just have to be one word. You can just react authentically, spontaneously. Okay, are you ready for the Big Fat Astro Chat challenge? Okay, the term.
All right.
The term astrologist.
It's just like, oh, like ignorance level confirmed. Like it's just like confirmed. And it's like, it doesn't necessarily make me angry, because pretty much anyone who uses the word astrologist seriously, like not ironically, just like really has no idea. So it just like, it's if it's like in person, it helps me gauge like where I need to meet this person, like as far as meeting that person where they are. Because like if you're not using that term ironically, you literally just don't know, and that's probably not your fault.
Yeah,
but it's just like,
yeah, it's a bit gross. But usually they just don't know better. Okay. The next term is Quincunx.
My brain's immediately like, okay, I'm gonna have to talk about like Aristotelian optic theory and how planets can't see each other when there are certain degrees, and why that's important, and why the literal definition of a quincunx is like when planets cannot see each other. So if you can't tell, I don't like the term. I don't like it as an aspect, because I think it's better to just be like, these planets aren't an aspect. What does that mean? Because it interprets kind of the same. And it allows, so like explaining background behind that, which I do a lot, is like, it's allowing someone to have a greater understanding around this planetary relationship without having to give it like a name, like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think one of my biggest problems with the term is just because I feel like people kind of want to make every geometric relationship between two planets important, or they want to make each one kind of like a thing. And I think that the so-called quincunx, or the aversion relationship, or opposing aversion relationship, is literally the lack of a connection. So like I think it's interesting that for a lot of non-astrologists who are resistant to that idea, they tend to be kind of attached to this idea that has to mean something, when they haven't considered what it might mean when two planets aren't actually in a kind of relationship, when they're in their blind spots, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful answer.
And well, and you know, like, yeah, well, and like there are some astrologers like Rick Levine, for example, who's done like so much work with like quintiles and septiles and all these things that I feel like are over my head. For all we really know, every planetary relationship could be important.
Yeah.
But like, by all means, start with the major ones.
Right.
And understand why they're the major aspects, and understand why other planetary configurations are not considered major aspects, because that right there will get you really far. So like so it's not to totally trash talk people who use minor aspects or like whatever. I don't, but yeah, it's just, to me, it just is like, just start with this. You'll get so much. I promise. Even if you don't start naming things that like, anyways, yes, well, we're in agreement.
Yeah.
On the same page.
The funny thing to me too about quincunxes versus other minor aspects is that I would actually consider the quintiles and septiles, etc., to be above the level of a quincunx aspect, because quintiles and septiles are based on a whole number division of the circle by 5 and 7. You know, those are
right.
Logic, you know, whereas the quincunx isn't based on a fundamental unit, you know. That even makes it different from other minor aspects. Like, even basically, like a septile technically has more like legitimacy than a quincunx. But anyway.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Well, thank you very much. Praise me. All right. So, okay. All right. Okay. React to this. Okay. Leo King drama. We don't have to get into
that was really childish.
Yeah.
No, I'll talk about it for a second. It's because, you know, I involved myself. I commented on the goddamn Sam's status. I talked to David Palmer, you know, as directly as I could, you know, over Facebook. Okay, here's the whole thing about entertainment and YouTube. It's really easy to be really good at entertainment and have that begin to obscure judgment or obscure maybe what were original motives for beginning on YouTube and doing this entertainment thing or this education thing. I posted a big long thing on my Facebook the day after all this happened, and it was basically on the topic of how education and entertainment aren't the same thing and how they can overlap, but they're very different. So the whole thing struck me as a hyperbolic reaction to something because that's more entertaining. It's an unfortunate truth, and this is for every single genre that you'll find on YouTube. Sensationalism and entertaining content will trump really good content, and that sucks. But it's true. So that's why people who strike the golden mean between education and entertainment are like my heroes. But there are a lot of people who will just take advantage of whatever they can to be that entertainment that can like satisfy a short attention span or what have you. That said, I think that was the thing, because like David's not an idiot, you know, like he may be an entertainer and he may take advantage of things in that way, but he's not stupid at all. Like I have not met him yet, but like he seems like a savvy guy, right? I was very pleased to see him kind of redact some of his statements and be like, hey, I was too harsh. Here's what really happened with the UX speaking slot thing. You know, I think I went a little too far. I was like, that's really great. Because I think it was just a case of getting kind of carried away. It was, you know what I mean? And it was like drama gets huge, and it's just like everyone's like, "Oh my God, did you hear that he's not, you know, he's quitting astrology?" Oh my God! As soon as it's gonna get you so many fucking views.
I mean, as soon as I heard about the news, I was just like, "Oh, Mercury retrograde. I know how this story goes." You know, like
it was really cliche Mercury retrograde.
It was so cliche. It was just like, this whole story again.
So much.
Yeah, it's very just, yeah, classic, like, surprising development, statement in reaction to it, public blowback to said statement, and then Mercury goes, direct, and Mercury says, I didn't mean to say the things I said, yada, yada, yada. So, I mean, like, I was actually going to do like a huge response to it, and I even made an awesome, like, photoshopped face apt, like remodeling of my own face, making myself look like Leo King, sort of making fun of his mohawk and stuff, faux hawk. But then I decided against it, which was my own cliche Mercury retrograde move, deciding, writing up this whole thing and then just going like, you know what, do I really want to, contribute to something that just needs to die a death? So I think we're just going to make it, I think this will be the official death of this topic, the RIP Leo King drama. All right.
Yep.
Okay. Let's see how you react to this. Astro.com.
The best. The only place to go to get your chart calculated. I mean, it's like, okay, so Astro.com, if you saw the how to read a chart video, you saw that I took like 30 seconds plus of precious time when I could have just gotten to the point to be like, please use Astro.com. Mm-hmm. One thing that I've heard criticized about Astro.com that I don't disagree with is that it's like a little dated looking and their charts are kind of like not beautiful, but like it's so worth it. There's so much utility there. I spent so many hours on Astro.com,
there's still a lot
especially starting out.
There's still a lot better than a lot of other free stuff.
Oh yeah.
So yeah.
Totally.
My biggest complaint.
It's a gold mine.
Yeah, but my biggest complaint about it when I was first using it was just that I wanted more than 100 charts. I like reached that like real quick.
That's hilarious.
But
oh my gosh, I love it.
I
love it.
What software do you use to calculate charts?
I use SolarFire.
Okay.
So, the standard.
The standard, yeah. So you don't have like Janus, Delphic Oracle, or Jigsaw, or all those.
No, Ryan has Janus, so I've like seen it used, but I don't know why I would get Janus, and I want Delphic Oracle, but then I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, zodiacal releasing, and like I have flashbacks of like listening to Chris's lecture for like actually 12 hours and just being like, I don't know if I'm ready for more zodiacal releasing.
Yeah, no, I get.
Yes,
yeah.
Literally me. Live footage of me, in late 2015 when all I did was Chris's Hellenistic course. Literally all I did. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'd like to get Delphic Oracle though. I probably will eventually.
Yeah, I'd highly recommend it. It's fantastic program, and what's amazing about it too is, you can already go down the rabbit hole with zodiacal releasing forever, basically, but there are like so many other Time Lord techniques which he programmed in that I haven't even seen anyone talk about yet. I've wanted to, for some time, I wanted to kind of look at some of these other ones, like decennials, quarters of the moon is very interesting to me, and I've seen a few people work with circumambulations, but like that's like one of the really like potentially important ones, just because it can similarly like kind of span a whole lifespan and kind of try to make sense of different periods of time. So there's so much uncharted territory, like even now, and there is a software which does these calculations, and I haven't really seen anyone kind of go like that too deep into it. So like it's so wide open, like the possibilities for research. So we're gonna have our hands full for a long time. I just wish we could live longer so I could just keep learning.
Yep.
But alas. Wow, that.
I know, you just gotta like write books and pass them on to posterity.
Yes, let's talk about our
As
deaths
you do.
a bit more. Okay, so let's put away the spontaneous reaction stuff. I had a couple more, but they weren't that great. What to you is the most kind of mind-blowing example of astrology working for you that you've seen, that like made you realize like, holy shit, like what are we dealing with here? Did you have a moment kind of like that, or was it kind of gradual, or?
Let's see. I mean, it's been gradual. It's been one of those things where like astrology never had to prove itself to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It
No, I get that.
always was like really spot on. Like it was always nailing things, even before I get into like timing and stuff. Just like the people I was around and like understanding them better and just feeling like astrology isn't everything. And all, like there's so many correspondences where you see archetypes reflected in daily life or in people around you or just situations in general, and you see how much astrology captures of that. I've seen that from the very beginning, and I think that's part of why I was drawn to that, because it just really resonates, you know, if you want to use a term like that, but it does. But as far as like moments when my mind was just blown, let's see, last year not last year, 2016, late summer 2016, I switched into a second house perfection year.
Mhm.
So I was like, oh, you know, like maybe money things for the first time since, you know, my last 12th house perfection, or I'm sorry, second house perfection year, which is when I was a teenager, when, you know, like money stuff's not, like your income when you're a teenager is not a huge focus. But Mercury was activated during that year. And it was Virgo year. So I was like, okay. And so I looked at the, you know, the annual perfections, and I looked at it with my solar return, and I won't get into technical stuff, but I was just like, it looks like I might do Mercury things for money and do really well, you know, with that. Like, that seems like really obvious. Like, okay. And then I was just like, you know, I'm not writing right now, though. I'm not really doing much of anything other than studying and just kind of whatever. Like that probably won't happen. That's context that's not here. That year, I joined the Soda Astrology Conference as their social media manager to design the program and flyer. Yeah, Mercury, weird. And I connected with an astrologer just over literally Snapchat. I was like, oh, I need more astrologers on Snapchat. Can I add you? And I was like, it's a big ask. This is like this is like a person in the community. And they're like, yeah, sure. And so we just started talking on Snapchat and like getting to know each other. And then I got hooked up for a ghostwriting gig that year. Like all of this happened within like a couple weeks. And I had never written horoscopes before. And I was like, you realize you're recommending me and I've never written these before. And they were like, oh yeah, you'll be fine. You can do it. I know you can. And I was like, okay. And so I did. And like, I did pretty well, you know, like the first month of dailies was rough, but before I knew it, I was like in the community. Mercury also rules my 11th house. So that tied in. It was just so Mercury perfection year. I couldn't even Mercury to do a Patrickism. Like it was just like so obvious.
Yeah.
It was so obvious that I would like call Ryan and be like, it's so obvious. Like, I don't even want to try to predict anything else because I know it'll happen because it's just, this is my life now. And so it's been there all along. I've always felt, like I said, like astrology didn't have to prove itself to me, but like that 2016, 2017 was just so freaking obvious. So obvious. The symbolism was just there. And like, there's been stuff since then, but nothing that hit me personally quite that hard. It was just like one thing after another, perfect, and it was cool.
That's really cool. I think a time that I really kind of blew my own mind with astrology was like back in 2009. I saw, like, when looking at my zodiacal releasing from the lot of errors, which is the lot of like that pertains to one's romantic life. And, you know, I saw that I had this Fortune 10th period start in like May of 2012. And 14 10th period is like supposed to be like the peak, of your,
Yeah.
like, it's supposed to be like one of the most sort of defining moments, or very
Right.
like peak activity moments. And it was kind of interesting to me because, that entire period that I was in at that point had been opposed by Saturn. And so I'd had like I'd had a few girls that I dated, but like nothing, I didn't really have any kind of serious relationships before that point. So I was kind of wondering, like, well, I mean, according to this technique, is that Saturn kind of opposes the period. Saturn kind of says no, but then I do have this one like glorious shining period. So it's like, okay, well, I don't know, what could happen that time. But so it turns out, like, on the day, like literally the day that I entered that Fortune 10th period, it was the first rehearsal of a choir that I was the accompanist for, and I was surrounded by all of these young women who were in the choir. And I mean, I just thought to myself, like, it'd be really funny if like I met one of them and like maybe like had a relationship or something. But that's exactly what happened. It was during a Venus retrograde as well. And that's how I met my
Oh my God.
That's how I met my wife like the next week. She was there, but we didn't meet until the next time that they met, that the group met. So yeah, I mean, I couldn't.
That is amazing.
It was weird. And it's funny because even when like we were together and things were kind of getting serious, I was sort of thinking like I mean, I'm still in this 14 10th period. Like, does this mean like this just continues? Just, like, we're gonna get married? And so we did. Like, just
will it
like
stick?
like a year later we were married. And so it was really, I don't know what to make of that. Like, what the hell? Like, I learned about that back in 2009.
It's almost like astrology works. It's so weird.
It's almost like
it's
astrology works. That's my that's like my unofficial slogan, like when I kind of see things like that. I mean, there's so many other things too that have just like boggled my mind, because it makes me think about, I mean, do you ever like get this feeling like what kind of world are we actually living in where this is a real thing?
Yes.
Like, because I don't know, I was just under the impression that,
absolutely,
like, it makes sense. Like, I was just under the impression that, like, there's cells and matter and like chemicals and like that's it. That we're just kind of these meat sacks and we have consciousness. But I don't think it's as simple as that. I think it's that and something else.
I think it's so much more than that. It's just like, I was never really a hardline materialist ever. Like, I'm just not that kind of person. I have way too much faith in the divine order of things, if, for lack of a better term. So like, but studying astrology and seeing things play out like this for myself and for others around me has just completely obliterated any chance I could have had at like having a materialist worldview. Like, it's completely impossible for me at this point. Like, if this world we lived in were really just like a bunch of, matter and stuff, this would not work. Like, it totally throws a wrench in that system, and it really makes you think. It's really thought-provoking, and it's just like, you have to, it changes your worldview, and it's really changed my worldview, like, in a way that, like, I'm super happy about it, but it's like, there's no going back at this point. It's just like, how could this possibly be true in a materialist world? And it's just, it can't be. So it's like, either I just ditch it, or I'm just like, I ditch materialism. So I mean, guess which one I did.
I mean, I think materialism doesn't have to be totally abandoned in some sense, because I think materialist, empiricalist science, essentially, I think that still describes one aspect of the world. I feel like science describes the metadata of our world, like it describes the bare facts. But I think the consciousness element of it, the meaning we derive from things, I think that's, and then this apparent cosmic sympathy between all living things, apparent consciousness of planets. I think this is all a bit alongside, materialism. I guess materialists just make the mistake of just presuming that, one way of explaining the world means that there isn't anything else to the world. And I think there might be both. I think there's
right. And oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like, there's no way, I would say, modern medicine hasn't done anything good for us.
right. Yeah.
All these technological
Yeah.
advances are bullshit. Like,
Yeah.
Obviously they're
yeah.
not, but like, assuming
Yeah.
that that's all there is to it,
Right.
and there's not an additional element that we can't understand yet in that framework. Like, talk about something that grinds my gears. It's this idea in general that, like, and Ryan and I talk about this a lot, like the idea that science right now has everything right, period, and they're not wrong about anything, is like really arrogant. And there have been so many things when you look at the history of science that, scientists were wrong about and that we just didn't understand yet. And like,
and there's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't.
There's nothing wrong with it at
right.
all. It's just if you close yourself off to the possibility,
right.
you're probably not doing very good science. But like, I'm comfortable with the unknown. I'm comfortable with things being a mystery. I'm comfortable with being like, astrology clearly works. It's observable. And we have no idea why in our current scientific climate. Yeah, complex language, what have you.
Right.
Like, I'm completely comfortable with that. There are many people who cannot stand that. And
right.
I'm just so not one of them.
Well,
so, but I can understand that. So
right.
what? Oh, Saturn people. Yeah.
The children of Saturn. I guess one thing kind of grinds my gears. So one thing that grinds my gears is just, like being considered to be like an enemy of science. Like I'm very pro science. I would never like, I always feel a bit kind of alienated in a sense, like what, like, please don't let me in with these creationists. Like, obviously the earth is older than 6,000 years old. Like, don't let me in with these people who say global warming isn't happening. Like, gosh,
right.
It feels unfair, but I guess skeptics are
right. This idea that like just this idea of like mutual exclusiveness, that like you can't be like pro science, which I kind of find to be kind of a silly term sometimes. It's like, how would you not? I mean, you can definitely not be pro science, like right. Obviously, like we've seen that, but it's just like, you can be pro science if you want to call it that, or be appreciative and supportive of the scientific community and like all this incredible things that they do for our society, but also be like, yeah, there's shit we don't know and we don't know how it works, and you can still observe it, and I'm down with that. Without, it's like, it's not mutually exclusive. It doesn't have to be. And like, it's such a fear-based reaction, in my opinion, to make it mutually exclusive. Like, are you literally that afraid to not be able to know something and nail it down? Mm-hmm. Like, that's fine, but like, call it what it is type of thing. But I don't know, that's just me.
Yeah, no, that's
but I'm with you.
Totally
yes
agree.
I'm with you.
I totally agree. Yeah, that's awesome. So when someone comes to you for reading, now I'm not asking you to reveal any like details, obviously I want you to respect the privacy and confidentiality of your clients, but what are some of the best experiences you've had, like as a counseling astrologer, with a client? Like, what is the most sort of like mind-blowing example of astrology in action that you've seen with a client? Like, so if someone comes to your site and wants a reading, like what are some of the things you have been able to do for people?
Well, okay, so I study a lot of traditional astrology, but I certainly didn't start out that way. I started out so much more woo, like so much woo. Like, you don't even know how many crystals are in my house from that era. And like, I still great, I'm into it. But like, so I study a lot of traditional stuff, and that's primarily like what I use as far as technique stuff. But when it comes to like sitting down with a person and like giving them a reading or whatever, it always tends to be a lot less cold and a lot more intimate. I end up getting people that come to me and they they want that like intimate connection versus just like predictions.
Yeah.
Right. So one thing I've always loved about astrology, and what I've always wanted to do with astrology, is provide a sense of belonging where you are in time and space for people. It's always really gratifying for me to be able to describe a placement in somebody's chart, and for them to be like, I'm not crazy. Like, that's totally me. Like, you got that from my chart. What? And I'm like, yeah, this is like your hardware that you were born with. And it's really affirming. And I think being able to help facilitate people getting to know who they already are is really empowering for people. And like being in a space of acceptance about who you are, where you are, whether that's in time, like whatever you're going through, you know, with timing techniques or transits or whatever, and just like who you are on a foundational basis, that allows people to draw on the strength they already have, but might not have believed they have. So like an actual, this just happens over and over. Like one of the most recent ones, so I was talking to this lady who is known for her family dynamic. She's got this huge family. They're a blast. I know them personally, and they like love hard and fight hard. And like, I'm trying to remember the exact placement, and I don't remember, but it was like 4th and 10th house, like tied in together, like her reputation, like her family, and that whole dynamic was that reputation. And there was something like Marsy involved, where it was like kind of like the fierce love, you know, rather than like the cushy nurturing thing. But it was spelled out so clearly. And just basically me being like, this is all reflected right here. And like, this is not only just what's happening to you, this is like the path you were set on from the beginning. And like, your acceptance of it will only, you know, like grow the best parts of that and like reinforce the best parts of that. And it was just so validating for her to hear that. And I know that sounds like maybe too feel good or too cheap, but like there were, and I don't want to get into them, like there were a lot of pretty negative aspects to all of this as well. Things like a lot of difficulties she had experienced in life and continued to as themes, and pointing that out as well, and being like, you know, this is right here in your chart, something that you couldn't control and that you were born with. And these things aren't your fault. It's, you know, the theme and like the experiences that you've had that have been so subjectively painful and so subjectively difficult have shaped who you are today. And, you know, your choices as far as like how to react to that and what to do with it are yours. Like those are also yours, not just this predisposition. And it's like I could see her like sit a little taller after that. And it's just like, that's like real differences in people waking up the next morning and being like, I'm where I'm supposed to be. Like this life is where I'm supposed to be. I'm not displaced. And that's the kind of stuff I love. And that's the kind of client work I end up getting, is a lot of that. Like if you feel like, oh, like I don't know what's happening, like everything feels wrong, like being able to stop, center, and like figure out where you are in time and space and where you belong. Because I think especially right now, a lot of people are trying to find out what that means and, you know, find their own voices and like feel like that matters and like matters in a way that makes sense. So I don't know if any of that made sense, but
that makes me want to get a reading with you. So one final question. Oh, thanks. So one final question for tonight. What astrologers do you admire, and like what astrologer would you most like to be like?
Oh.
And I know, obviously not counting me, obviously, you know.
Right. I just I mean, we talked about that before we started recording,
right,
obviously.
Right,
so, well, we actually did start talking about this before we started recording. I so admire Austin Coppock as a writer and astrologer. Just like, I mean, there are so many other, like sensei, but his work is just so great. And like, I love writing. I remember like my dad teaching me Microsoft Word when I was 4 so I could write stories. And like, that was always kind of my plan, like, you know, B, C, D, E, F, like, you know, W was like, oh, maybe I'll be a writer. And like, I'm at a point where I'm actually doing some writing, and it's like, I'm loving it, but it's so hard and it's so much work. And I just really admire Austin's ability to like live and breathe stories and convey so much poignant meaning with like the way he writes about the symbolism. Like he captures so much. So I'm a huge fangirl, obviously. You know, who isn't, but
I'm a huge fangirl of Austin.
Oh yeah, totally. Other than that, just comes to mind first because I read his stuff all the time. And this is also like fangirl central, and it's super obvious, but like my first real astrology book was a Rob Hand book. And like my husband got it for me, and I 100% couldn't read it. I was like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. I don't know what any of this means. And like, but I returned to it, you know, like through my studies and started to understand it. And I actually got a reading with Rob Hand very early on. And he's the reason I started studying astrology seriously.
That is
and of course he's a legend.
Yeah,
he looked at my Mercury placement. And it's in Virgo conjunct the lot of fortune. And he was like, oh yeah, you can do astrology. Because I told him I was like kind of dabbling, and he was like, oh yeah, you can do astrology and probably make money at it. And so like 22-year-old me is like, I was like, holy shit. So I started studying seriously after that. And, you know, here we are today. But everyone wants to be Rob Hand. Who doesn't want to be Rob Hand when they grow up? So
that's so cool. That's so cool.
It's fun.
I'm trying to think if I ever got I did get my chart read by a legend once. I got Robert Zola. Robert Zola.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't like a full-on reading. He's known for his doomy readings. His readings have extra doom, and so he took a look at my chart, and he gave me one hell of a doomy reading. He
really?
Yeah, he said, I mean, I honestly, I don't even know if I should say it. It was so doomy, but
I mean, don't share if you don't want to, but I'm leaning forward.
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe that will be after hours, at the after party of this interview / discussion.
I'm down.
Okay,
that works.
But I know I brought that up. All right. Well, thank you, Jo, so much for coming on Big Fat Astro Chat. And so again, if you are interested in getting a consultation from Jo or reading her posts and her upcoming posts and watching her videos, you should go to her site, www.amyjogleason.com, and make sure you subscribe to the channel Cups and Crowns. And you might also consider subscribing to this channel, Big Fat Astro Blog. If you liked this episode, I'll have many more like it. And you can catch my daily vlog as well as my other regular astrology videos. And so if you like this, you can share it on your Facebooks and your Twitters. And you can leave us a comment below to let us know what you think. And thank you so much for being on the show, Jo.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It is a pleasure and an honor, Patrick.
Thank you very much. Yeah. All right. Thank you, and see you next time.